Back after 9 days on the ground reporting the Israel retaliation against Hamas and its war on Gaza Strip, we are today looking at the India response. I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo story. In the last few days, the Modi government has calibrated its response on the issue of the Israel retaliation on the Hamas. Initially, of course, India unequivocally stood in solidarity with Israel. But as devastating images of civilian casualties have come to haunt in many ways the world's conscience, these images of devastation, deaths, children's deaths in particular coming out of Gaza, the Modi government too has calibrated its position. The opposition parties have taken a much more strident position. Shashi Tharoor is among Congress leaders who addressed a mammoth pro-Palestine rally organized in Kerala by the Indian Union of Muslim League. Asaduddin Owaisi is an example of another major Indian Muslim politician who has been mobilizing crowds on the Palestinian issue. But is this issue even a factor here? Is this issue being stirred up by politicians, or is this something that has caught the wider imagination of people here? Looking today at Israel, Hamas, Gaza, the Palestinian question, and the Indian response, and also the domestic politics around it, let me introduce our panel on the program today. Let's bring up our guests one by one. Tavleen Singh, veteran author, columnist, whose trenchant columns on Israel have earned her a lot of feedback, good, bad, and ugly, as is the case these days with anything we say. Also joining us is Zafar Sareshwala, educationist and commentator. Also joining us on the program is Congress leader Salman Soz. Welcome to the program, Salman. Also joining us is political analyst and commentator Zainab Sikandar. Always a pleasure, Zainab. And also joining us is military veteran Commodore GJ Singh. Thank you very much, all of you, for your time. Let me actually start with you, Tavleen, because you said twice that you actually supported Israel's position. I've just returned from simply a professional assignment in Israel and already been having raging arguments with my friends on the left who think that just by going and reporting the story, in some ways, we have become quote-unquote cheerleaders. But you have stuck to your position even while pointing out criticism in how Israel is handling its retaliation. How do you see the response in India? Tavleen.
I think that, everyone can see what the response is. You've got even the government backing down on its original position. And you've got the entire political class totally on the side of Palestine. But I actually do not see this as a Palestine versus Israel issue. I see it as a terrorist organization going into Israel and committing horrible, barbarous crimes. So, just as we would not treat the Lashkar-e-Taiba as Pakistan, I think it's wrong to think of the Hamas as representative of anything to do with Palestine's history or with the history of this problem. I also would like to say very clearly that Hamas is responsible for the suffering of the people of Gaza. Hamas alone. If they had released the hostages on day one, we would not see any of this happening. There would have been a totally different story going on. So as far as I'm concerned, I remain on the side of Israel because I cannot really digest what happened there.
Let me push you back on one point. You said Hamas alone is responsible for the suffering of Gaza. Why do you say that? Any counter-terrorism strategy, and we know this from our own military when it's responded to terror threats, has to have a plan. And its plan should be to take out terrorist infrastructure. India's surgical strike, for example, after the terror attack in Uri, did not go and bomb Pakistani civilians, nor did India do that in the aftermath of 26/11. So when you say the Hamas alone is responsible, why do you say that?
Why did they not release the hostages? Who has endangered the life of civilians in Gaza time and time again? Why does Hamas hide behind its civilian population in Gaza to do what it's been doing? So, I really don't see the analogy with Uri here. This is a terrorist organization that has always treated civilians as, collateral damage, its own people. So, let's not confuse what happened in Uri with this. This is a different thing. And to tell you the truth, if Lashkar-e-Taiba, I mean, when they came into Bombay or when they go into Kashmir, etc., do we then say, that Lashkar-e-Taiba represents Pakistan?
Right. Let's open this up, but let me start by playing a clip of Shashi Tharoor, Congress leader, speaking at a pro-Palestine rally, where he walked that tightrope between calling out the terrorism of Hamas, but at the same time talking about the rights of the Palestinian people. Listen in, and then I'll come to Salman Soz. Take a look.
You are here for peace and human rights. This may well be one of the most important political rallies we have seen in India and perhaps across the world in defense of human rights and in favor of peace. This is a rally for peace. India has always stood for peace since the time of Gandhiji. We have always stood for a permanent solution to this crisis, to Israelis and Palestinians living in peace side by side, in dignity and security in their own lands, behind their own borders. പക്ഷെ അതെയല്ല നമ്മളിവിടെ കാണുന്നത്. മാനുഷിക നിയമത്തിൻ്റെ ലംഘനങ്ങളാണ് നമ്മൾ കാണുന്നത്. ഒക്ടോബർ 7 ഭീകരവാദികൾ ഇസ്രായേലിൽ ആക്രമണം ചെയ്തു. 1400 വ്യക്തികളെ കൊന്നു. 200 ആൾക്കാരെ ഹോസ്റ്റേജായി എടുത്തു. പക്ഷെ അതിൻ്റെ മറുപടി ഇസ്രായേലിൻ്റെ ഗാസയെ ബോംബിംഗ് ചെയ്തിട്ട് 1400 അല്ല, ഒരു 6000 പേരെ കൊന്നു കഴിഞ്ഞു. ബോംബിംഗ് നിർത്തിയിട്ടില്ല. അത് മാത്രമല്ല, നിങ്ങൾക്കറിയാം ഇസ്രായേൽ ചെയ്യുന്ന ചില കാര്യങ്ങൾ. ഭക്ഷണം, ഗാസയിൽ കിട്ടുന്ന ഭക്ഷണം ഭൂരിപക്ഷം ഇസ്രായേൽ വഴിക്കാണ് വരിക. അതെല്ലാം അവർ നിർത്തി. വെള്ളം നിർത്തി. വൈദ്യുതി അവർ നിർത്തി. പെട്രോൾ, ഡീസൽ അവർ നിർത്തി. ഇതൊന്നും ഇപ്പൊ ഇല്ല ഗാസയിൽ. ആസ്പത്രികൾക്ക് അവർ പ്രവർത്തനം ചെയ്യാൻ ഭയങ്കര ബുദ്ധിമുട്ടിലാണ് ഇരിക്കുന്നത്. നിരപരാധിയായ സിവിലിയൻസ്, സ്ത്രീകള്, കുഞ്ഞുങ്ങള്, യുദ്ധം ചെയ്യാത്ത വ്യക്തികൾ ഓരോ ദിവസം മരിക്കുന്നു.
Now, Salman, we live in such polarized times that Shashi Tharoor was basically making the commonsensical argument that what Hamas did was terror, but that should not mean that hundreds of thousands of civilians in Gaza pay for it. Even for calling Hamas for a terrorist group, he's been attacked by people on the left, by parties on the left, and you would have seen that controversy in Kerala. You come from Kashmir. Tavleen raised the analogies of Lashkar. Tomorrow, the Hizbul Mujahideen could say it stands for quote-unquote resistance. How would we as Indians feel then?
Well, the fact of the matter is that the government of India is not then going to go and basically destroy all of Kashmir. That it doesn't work like that. I think Tavleen Singh is wrong. The reason she is wrong is because it is one thing to say that there was a terror attack, and it was horrible, and I can say it too, because it was. There is, what Shashi says is true. It was a terror attack. But what Israel is doing now is basically, that is terrorism too. That is state terrorism, state-sponsored terrorism. Not even state-sponsored. This is state terrorism. You're depriving people of water. You're depriving them of food. You're depriving them of medical assistance. You're bombing pretty much indiscriminately, as we can see in your own video right now. What is that? And by the way, let's for a moment just take October 7th and keep it to the side. What was happening in that part of the world for decades? What is it that we want for the Palestinian people and the Israeli people? What do we want for them? I think in some ways, if countries like India, what Shashi said, that is India's stand, for as long as I can remember, that we want peace in that part of the world. We believe in the two-state solution. So does much of the world. So does the United Nations. But the question is, who doesn't want peace there? We can say that Hamas, by attacking Israel, doesn't want peace, and they should be, we should deal with them in as kind of tough a manner as possible. Great. But who's on the other side? Prime Minister Netanyahu, we tend to forget. But history is not, wiped away just because we forget. after Prime Minister Rabin was murdered, his family was of the view that Netanyahu was complicit in his murder. Why? Because he was always against the two-state solution, and he said so much. He said as much multiple times. In fact, when he took over, if you remember, Yitzhak Shamir was the prime minister between him and Prime Minister Rabin. He lost in 1992, and he said that if I had been prime minister, I would delay negotiations on autonomy for 10 years, and we would have 500,000 settlers in the West Bank, and we would never have to give up anything. And now we have 750,000 settlers in the West Bank. Who wants peace? I think we keep saying, everybody says that we should have a two-state solution. Great. But is it possible now? Really? Let's be honest with each other. Is it possible? Would we be talking about the Palestinians had October 7th in some ways not happened? Think about it. We've forgotten pretty much. We've all moved on with our lives. Happily, we're all doing our things. But the fact of the matter is that somebody's got to talk about these people. It's not just the people in Gaza. Forget people in Gaza. What about people in the West Bank?
Okay.
Where
before I open this,
India's only saying something that makes sense, that we need to do something about this place because it is a grievous wound on civilization.
I want Tavleen very briefly before I open it up to respond to this. The fact that there is an occupied and occupier historicity here is what is reiterated again and again. That somehow when we respond, we have to remember that history. How do you respond to that, Tavleen?
Well, I actually agree with Salman about Netanyahu. Netanyahu's made no effort at all to bring peace in that region. I think the settlers in, the expansion of the settlements in the West Bank is shocking. But I also believe that this is disconnected. This act of terrorism is disconnected from the story of Palestine. The minute you link it, you are actually justifying terrorism, which is what a lot of people have done, And secondly, I really believe that there is a division now between democratic countries and those who are against democracy. Don't forget who's on the other, who's backing Hamas, Russia, China, Iran, countries from the Muslim world who have never understood the word democracy. So frankly, I don't see this as anything to do with the history of Palestine. That's another story that we can talk about later. I personally think the issue at the moment is release those 200 hostages. Release them, then we can start talking about peace.
Right. Those are images of children's toys at a square in Tel Aviv to mark the children who have been taken hostage. But as devastating as these images are, equally devastating is a horrifying image of a journalist from Al Jazeera who lost his entire family in an Israeli airstrike only to return to work. Perhaps the most heartbreaking image was, if we can hear the sound up on that, he revealed to the world that his son too had wanted to be a reporter. Okay, let's listen to this extraordinary reporter who has in fact returned to work after losing his entire family.
السلام عليكم. أولا شكرا على كل رسائل التضامن والاتصالات والسؤال عن التضامن معنا والدعوات لنا. بالتأكيد هذا شيء كان مهما بالنسبة لنا، لكن رأينا أنه من الواجب أن نعود سريعا رغم كل شيء. فالساحة والمحاور لا زالت تشتعل كما ترون بالغارات وبالقصف المدفعي والتطورات متلاحقة. فرأيت أن من واجبي رغم الوجع ورغم الجرح النازف أن أعود سريعا وألتقيكم من خلال عدسة الكاميرا عبر مواقع التواصل. يعطيكم العافية وأسألكم الدعاء دائما. السلام عليكم.
Absolutely heartbreaking. And Tavleen says it is the Hamas and the Hamas alone, or at least primarily, that has to be held responsible. If Hamas had released hostages, maybe today the world response would be different. The pressure on Israel would be different. My question to you, Zafar Sareshwala, is a slightly different question. Salman is from Kashmir, a place I have reported on and from for very long. But Muslims outside of Kashmir have never really been agitated even over the Kashmir issue. They see it as a localized regional issue. Today, we see Indian Muslim politicians, the Indian Union Muslim League, Asaduddin Owaisi, trying to mobilize, rally large crowds on the issue of Palestine. Is this an issue for Indian Muslims?
See, Barkha, this issue is only limited to what's happening now in Palestine and the Palestinian suffering. Beyond that, I don't think or I don't see anything this to be an issue for Indian Muslims at all. Because this issue about Palestine is not new. The occupation, the subjugation, the kind of ill treatment and the traumatic events. I mean, this is, of course, we have seen now, but we've been seeing for years. And now this is actually multifold seen because of mushrooming growth of social media. Now we have Twitter and we have TikTok and we have WhatsApp, so it is spreading. So it is nothing beyond that. Now I've got another thing, Barkha. I have traveled extensively to Israel and also to Palestine. I have met the Jews, I have met people in the government there in Israel. I have met the Muslims. There are about 20% Muslims in Israel also. I have met them. I have spent almost 8 days in Palestine also, in almost 6 or 7 cities. Now, I'm just repeating what the UN chief said the other day in the United Nations, and which was very difficult for the Israelis to palate. He said this about October 7, he condemned. I also have condemned what happened on October 7th was a terrorist attack. But then what the United Nations chief said, he said you cannot look the events of October 7 in isolation. It has to be seen in reflection of 57 years of occupation, the humiliation, the settlements. So you cannot remove that. And Barkha, I have seen the kind of humiliation every single day the Palestinians go through in the checkpoints. I myself seen every 5 kilometers, there are 10 checkposts. Even if you want to go to pray at Al-Aqsa Mosque, there are 5 checkposts and you are humiliated every single day. So this has been happening. So, of course, the events of October 7, the children killed, need to be told. But Barkha, I'm asking you, I have not said this. The UNICEF chief is saying that the deaths of babies in Palestine is stain on the collective conscience of all of us. So we will forget that. Hamas is different, but you will paint all Palestinians with Hamas. And in West Bank, there has been atrocities. There is not a single Hamas guy there. I have spoken to people from Hamas, from people of PLO, from people of Al-Fatah. In fact, my last conversation with the National Security Advisor of Israel was that this subjugation of Palestinians every single day, do you accept that? And I asked her, I said that you are only managing the whole issue. You are not solving it. So how long you are going to manage this with your military power? And it has exploded now. So I think you have to see you cannot put it in just one or two segments. You have to see it on the whole, the occupation, the settlements, and the inhuman treatment of Palestinians every day.
So unlike Tavleen, you do not believe that those strands can be separated at this point. Commodore Singh, my question to you is this. If the world agrees that Israel has the right to self-defense, to retaliation after the terror attack, because we all seem to agree, at least, that Hamas inflicted terror on Israeli civilians, what are the options before Israel? Because the fact is that you cannot dismantle Hamas without going into Gaza. Hamas has hundreds of kilometers of underground network of tunnels. And yet, if Israel bombs civilians, it leads to the kind of mass devastation. And can we play some of those images of children, thousands of children dead in Gaza? Surely, the fact is, Israel has no good options. That's the truth. Israel has no good military options.
Barkha, thank you for having me on your show. I want to make it very clear that whatever options are there, on the table of Israel, they are doing it, and they're doing it right, because I stand on the side of Israel. First of all, I want to tell you why it made Israel is so angry. What made it so angry? It was October, not only October 7th, the terror attack, but it was actually a
Sorry, sir, we can't hear you very well.
holy day
I'm
for
so sorry,
them.
sir. I'm so sorry, sir. We can't hear you at all. I'm going to have to request you. I'm going to have to ask you to reconnect.
Israel. I'm an authority on Israel and Jewish law and Jewish calendar and Torah and Islam as well. I have visited the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Now, what I want to tell you is that Simchat Torah is one of the holiest day on a Jewish calendar, like Yom Kippur. Earlier, whole the Islamic world got together. They attacked Israel on a day called Yom Kippur, on which that Yom Kippur war is named. It was on Yom Kippur day, the day on which the whole of Israel fast is a day of fasting, day of atonement. So these Islamic countries, they decided to attack on that particular day because they knew that they will be fasting. Now, this time, 7th October, is Simchat Torah. It is a culmination of that Yom Kippur. And Simchat Torah in secular language is called musical festival. What most of the channels are saying.
But sir, if you
Just a minute, I'll complete it. So this is what makes Israel very angry. The second point, which you are coming on to, why they are bombing the civilian areas, the rockets are being fired from civilian areas on Israeli civilian populated areas. The Hamas is firing from the mosques, from the schools, from the cemeteries, from the hospitals, and the Israel is left with no option except to fire back on from where the fire is coming. There is no technology developed in this world till to date that the weapons or the missiles or the rockets will identify that this man is a civilian, this man is a terrorist. So the Israelis are handcuffed. They just cannot do anything except bombing on the civilian areas. And the civilian population which is suffering today, all that, crying, and you see these images which are really heart-wrenching of children, women, old people being bombed. Hamas is accountable. It is Hamas who is to be held. There are some laws in war also. They should come out and fight it open. Why are they making them as a human shield? I don't understand this. The Islamic world is now getting united because they see these images there. Everybody is talking. It's a humanitarian crisis. It is they are by bombing the civilian areas. The Israel army has made it very clear. First of all, they give sufficient warning to clear the area, and then they tell them that, look, now we are coming. They are not bombing blindly. Okay. They are not fools.
The fact is that there are, if you look at the official figures released by Palestine, which America has questioned, the deaths in Gaza have far now overtaken the killings in Israel. But of course, a life killed is a life killed, and I don't want to do this numerical comparison. I want to bring in Zainab. There is an assumption that the Indian Muslim will be very agitated over Palestine. There is a stereotypical sort of assumption on the behalf of Indian Muslims. As an Indian today, I saw your tweet. You said you feel very proud that India is sending humanitarian assistance in for the Palestinians. How do you see the larger debate?
To be honest, anybody who says that they're completely on Israel's side, I just personally feel are very biased, because then you're basically trying to say that the identity of Palestine as a state never existed. Because if you're saying you're completely on the side of Israel and that Palestine nowhere is justified in any of the actions they've done since 1948, then basically you're trying to say that Palestine as an entity is not legit. And to me, politically, that stands as a completely false statement. As far as what happened on October 7th, again, as has been stated by many leaders, it's not something that has happened in vacuum. There's been years and years of atrocities from both sides. Okay, because I always say this whenever I talk about any issue which has a Muslim angle to it. Just because I'm Zainab Sikandar, I'm not going to say things which are going to be cherry picked on one side. I'm saying facts which are from both sides. And the reality is that the bias right now, when it comes to Israel versus Gaza, has boiled down to Jews versus Muslims. If you look at it as a discussion today, even in India, there are so many tweets and so many people talking about it. Why? How does it affect an Indian what's happening thousands of miles away? Because this has stopped being a political issue. It's actually become a religious issue. And
But
yes,
that was my question, Zainab. Why does it matter? I don't
I'm
mean to
coming to
sound
it.
inhumane, but why does it matter? It's a distant war.
Yes.
Kashmir has not triggered as much domestic debate as Israel-Palestine has. Why?
Yeah, I'm coming to it. So Palestine, when it comes to how Indians view it, from the time of our independence, you have to understand Palestine was always seen in the Indian context and with ultra nationalists of India. They always saw Palestinians as brothers in bondage. These are words that have been used back in the 40s and 50s. Okay, so to say that India can't identify with Palestine, we completely identify with Palestine because of our colonial past. We know what occupation means, which is why our country has unequivocally always said that we consider the Palestine cause as a just cause. In 2021, the permanent UN representative of India, Mr. T.S. Tirumurti, said this categorically in a virtual UN Security Council meeting, that India supports the just cause of Palestine, and we will always be in support of the two-state policy. Now, this I'm talking politically, but you have to understand the politics that is happening in India vis-a-vis Israel and Palestine. It's considered to be the smarter thing to do. Modi ji has always aspired to be a Vishwaguru, so he's siding on the block which he knows that he will enter the new international order. Please just let me complete, then I'll tell you what the public is thinking. Okay, so Modi ji, when he says I'm in support of Israel, great. Then he sends his support to Palestine by sending the supplies, great. It has been dumbed down to a war of civilizations vis-a-vis Muslims versus anybody else. And that is why in India, the support towards Israel is more to do with a polarization of votes. And this is happening on the eve of the 2024 election. So to Indian leaders, it is a justified way of again playing the religion card, be it Asad Owaisi or be it a pro-Hindutva supporter. The reason Palestine is now being used in India is because if, again, the polarization, the religion card would have been used in the 2024 election, trust me, people of India would have seen right through it. Palestine is just the perfect justification. Hamas, the terrorist attack, has been the perfect justification for any pro-Hindutva supporter in India to say, look, if you don't bring us back to power, India will be same as Israel is today. You will have terrorists of a certain community doing to India what has been done to Israel. This is the trope that has been used constantly. Anybody denying it is living under a rock.
Okay, that's a lot to unpack there, and let me pick up the last part of what you said. Yes, all of you, I'm sure, want to react. I'll start with Tavleen, then Commodore Singh, and then Zafar, and then Salman. There is some truth to Zainab if you look at this through the prism of social media. I'm not saying that's the only platform, but the social media tropes are kind of Jews versus Muslim. You have the right wing jumping all over this with an extreme position. You have the left wing jumping all over this with an extreme position, right? There's a far left denialism of Hamas as a terror group, and there's a right wing almost sort of gloating that see the Muslims did it again. There is a polarization. We can't deny that. And some of us were trying to say, look, the truth is a multi-textured thing. Nobody wants to hear us. Tavleen?
Yes, there is a polarization. And it's quite ugly, because it's true that the Hindutva lot have taken the side of the Jews purely because the other side is Muslim. There's no question about that. But please, all this going on about the victimhood of the Palestinians, please remember how many times there were efforts to bring peace, the Abraham Accords, and at the very last moment, they were broken by the Palestinian side. Secondly, how do you negotiate if you have on the other side people who say Israel has to be wiped off the face of the planet? That has been the position. And when they were moved from that position, what do we get? Hamas. What is the aim of Hamas? To destroy Israel. What is the aim of Iran? It's publicly stated. So say that I don't know how to think of another analogy, but say that, you want to wipe some Indian state off the face of the earth, and you say that, now let's negotiate about that. That's what we're talking about. There is an
Zafar sir,
unreasonableness on the Palestinian side that none of your panelists seem to accept. It's not a Hindu-Muslim issue anymore. It is a question of democracies on one side objecting. I stand with Ukraine against Russia. I really believe that India
you don't
has.
you don't believe Palestine is the underdog here, not Hamas. Palestine is the underdog.
No, I really believe that there have been many opportunities. I can't list them, but I've actually seen Arafat and Shimon Peres talk about this on a platform and seen the unreasonableness that Arafat showed. So I
Okay.
mean, you cannot wipe away history. It's like Pakistan saying, until we get Kashmir, there will be no peace with India. History has happened, whatever
Zafar,
the reasons for it to happen.
Zafar Sureshwala, to you, the analogy is being drawn with the Lashkar and the Hizbul. Do you accept those analogies? There are Kashmiris also who will say it is a heavily militarized area. We are humiliated. We can't go, not maybe now, but there have been those accounts in the past. There
No,
were a whole
Barkha,
bunch of leaders arrested in the aftermath of the abrogation of 370. If at that time Hizbul had launched a terror attack, we wouldn't be saying let's put Hizbul in the context of the history of Kashmir, or would we?
Barkha, I have a different take on that, and I'll see on the facts. Now, you also there on the ground. In more than 200 cities, there have been demonstrations for the cause of Palestine. In cities like London, Washington, D.C., Florida.
Oops, we lost Zafar just
No,
at that
I'm
point.
there.
Yeah, you're back. Yeah.
In Florida, in so many places across the world have been happening. Now, Jews, for example, in the US, in New York, in Washington, also Barkha, as we are talking, every single day there is demonstration in Tel Aviv against Netanyahu.
Agreed.
Recently, 90 academics of from London University to Harvard to Houston University to Stanford have written open letter to Biden, to Sunak, to Macron about the Palestinian cause. And out of those 90, I could only find 5 or 6 Muslims. So it is not about that. In fact, if you see the whole Twitter, now on Twitter, more people are taking cause of the Palestinians, and they are not all Muslims. In fact, government of India's position now is towards Palestine. Of course, they condemned. Mr. Modi condemned what happened on October 7th, but immediately a detailed response from ministry came, and where they said that the response of Israel after October 7th is against humanitarian cause. And it very clearly mentioned that we support the just cause of the Palestinians. In fact, Mr. Modi's statement of November 22nd last year, when the Palestinian Day was there, you read that. So I think government of India's position has been towards Palestinians just cause.
You've made a very important point about the calibration of the government's position. And Commodore Singh, that's the point, that even those who started, as Prime Minister Modi did, by calling out the terrorism of Hamas, the mounting suffering in Gaza makes it impossible actually for Israel to hold on to the narrative. Israel looked like it owned the narrative in the aftermath of the terror attack. Do you think Israel is now losing that narrative, Commodore?
No, I don't think so. In the Western world, they are holding the same position what they had before, because the West understands the Israel, what the countries in the Middle East call them occupation. What is West Bank? I want to clarify first this. The West Bank of River Jordan is called the West Bank. Its original name is Judea and Samaria. So Israelis say this belongs to us. This is the actual name, what it was. because Israel is the only nation in the world that is governing itself in the same territory, under the same name, with the same religion, with the same language as it was doing 3,000 years back at the time of King Solomon and David. Islam, advent of Islam came later. The Christianity came later. What is Abrahamic Accord? It is that the Islam or Muslims and Jews come from they are the descendant of the same father, Abraham. That is why it is called Abraham Accord. It comes from two wives of Abraham. It comes down from the same lineage.
So are you saying that the Palestinians have no right to their own state, or are you saying that's not relevant right now? Which one are you saying? I did not say that.
I am saying that they had vacated Gaza. Why? Earlier, they wanted to live in peace. They said, you take Gaza, you govern it. Okay. We are not interfering. Okay. So the solution lies in two-state, Palestine and Israel. Why call them occupiers? This is what I don't understand. They are not occupiers. They come to the original place. They belong to this area. They were diaspora took place in 70 AD. I think the people in India need to understand the Jewish history or the history of the world. Okay, it is not only here, what we talk about. You have to learn and understand how the various religions came into the world after Abrahamic religion.
Let's talk about the immediate. Immediately, Salman, if there isn't a ceasefire, if the world is not able to prevail upon Israel to announce a ceasefire, what do you see happening?
Well, first of all, almost 7,000 Palestinians have died so far. 40% roughly are children. That would be the equivalent of India losing 500,000 people, including 2 lakh children, just to put this in context. Okay. Now, I don't know. I mean, I don't understand geopolitics these days. It's very complex. But if Israel continues on this path, I think what we'll see is basically lack of any progress on peace between these two parties, the Israelis and the Palestinians, for the foreseeable future, perhaps in our lifetime. But I do want to make 2 very quick points. One on Tavleen Singh's point about how the Palestinians have never really been for peace. Yasser Arafat and Rabin and Shimon Peres, they did get the Nobel Prize for the Oslo Accords. And Tavleen talks about history. History is that in 2001, Netanyahu was caught on tape bragging to Jewish settlers, saying that and I'm quoting, I de facto put an end to the Oslo Accords. This is Prime Minister Netanyahu, the leader of the Israelis. He also said that the way to deal with Palestinians is to beat them up, not once, but repeatedly. Beat them up so it hurts so badly until it is unbearable. That is Prime Minister Netanyahu. He's the leader of Israel. Is that the language of peace? That Tavleen Singh feels that the Palestinian side has not been, holding on to. I'm sorry that the Commodore is not here. I wish he were here, because I would want to tell him that since he says that he's an expert and a historian, he should know that the Yom Kippur war was started by 3 countries which are Muslim majority, which is Syria and Jordan and Egypt, but not by the Islamic world. And those countries are not Islamic countries. Okay, and then he talks about Judea and Samaria as if, I think he's read too much Zionist literature, because that is what they said, as if the Palestinians did not exist and the Israelis came from nowhere. They were always there. I mean, this is not the kind of expertise we should have here. I mean, he's entitled to his opinion. But Barkha, I wish you would challenge your panelists and basically on history. This is not rocket science. There is no Judea and Samaria from the Balfour Declaration of 1917. That is when the Brits did this to these people. The way the Brits did this to us. In fact, Indians should actually sympathize, as they do, as others are doing, with people in this region because the Brits have done to those people what they did to us.
Okay.
In fact, and by the way, this is not a Hindu-Muslim issue. If it was a Hindu-Muslim issue, then you would not see young people in America, in European countries going out and protesting.
I'm not an expert on the history of the region, but I did want to add one feedback from on the ground in Israel that everybody I met in Israel blamed Netanyahu for actually strengthening Hamas and weakening the Palestinian Authority.
That is
So I
true.
just wanted to
That is true.
underline that irony. Tavleen, very quickly, and then I'll give Zainab the last word. She's been waiting, but you wanted to respond.
I just want to make 2 points. One, I'm not on the side of Netanyahu. I think he's a monster, and I hope he loses and is thrown out of power. Two, what I said about the peace, the history, why are we going on about the history of Palestine as if suddenly Hamas is the new kind of Palestine? It is not. What we're dealing with is the consequence of a terrible act, a savage, barbaric act of terrorism. And to this, what needs to be done now is for Hamas to release those hostages, and then everyone should pull back, and then you can start talking about history and peace and who's wrong.
But
and who's
Israel,
right.
but Israel won't pull back because Israel's stated aim is to dismantle the Hamas.
Israel is harming itself by not pulling back. If the hostages are released, it will have no reason whatsoever for continuing with the siege of Gaza, which is horrible.
Okay, Zainab, and then Salman, I'll see if there's time for you to interject. Zainab, please go ahead.
I just wanted to, your panelist who just went off, I mean, I just want to tell him, we are in a debate, we're not in a lecture. Otherwise, we all have credentials to speak of. I am a history student. I've taught Delhi University, and I don't like to say it on camera because he keeps talking about how he's an expert. But, we're in a political debate here. And the reason that I said anybody who says that they're unequivocally on the side of Israel don't see the entity of Israel as legitimate. And stuff that is spoken, which is a very Zionist kind of a narrative, that should be stayed away from, because it's again very one-sided, and also it's also very full of hate and spite. And I felt he was speaking in that language. The reality again is Palestine has never been able to express itself except through the videos and, the horrific stories that they tell through their own words. Because Israel is a proper government with a military, with a sophisticated entire infrastructure, whereas Palestine is literally living like they're in the Stone Age. That is why you see them, what's their way of protesting? Stoning. But now, this has become very synonymous with Muslims, stone pelting and protesting, Muslims do it. And that's the kind of narrative we're still speaking, and that's the kind of language we're still using. And it's very sad that any resistance from the Palestinian part is always termed as terrorism. And anybody that has an organized way of doing the same thing is seen as fighting for their rights.
Do you believe what the Hamas did is resistance?
It's I absolutely condemn it. But how do Palestinians resist? Please tell me, because even if they protest, it's considered as a terrorist act. Even if the civilians do a protest, haven't you seen children being handcuffed, who are walking around the mosque? Or haven't you seen children being pushed and jailed? Don't we know of 7-year-olds, 9-year-olds, 12-year-olds being jailed? Can we deny that reality also? Trust me, I don't want to be on the side of either Palestine or Israel as an Indian Muslim. I have my own issues in my own country. I don't want to, fight someone else's battle. But the reality is you cannot call this victimhood. How can you call someone who's been a victim? They are victims. It's not a victimhood they are playing. They are victims.
Zafar Sareshwala? No, sir, you're on mute. Sir, please. I don't know why we lost you at that point, that you wanted to make a point. Can we add him back? Let me just do it. Go ahead, Zafar bhai. Yes.
I was giving you that history that only 1800 years ago, the Jews were ruling this part under the prophet Joshua. After that, the Jews were never there. And if we start using this analogy, then today nobody would be able to live in his home. Tomorrow everybody will come to my house and they say that 2000 years ago, this was my place. So I'm coming back to it. So I think this analogy would be very dangerous. I think we should shun this. Then if that is the case, the Red Indians would say, okay, come on, vacate the whole of New York. This was our land. I think this will go nowhere. We have to stop this.
Okay, I'm going to give a quick 30-seconders to Tavleen and Salman. Salman, you were wanting to come in?
Yeah, I think we really have to figure out a better way to talk about, how people can resist. I think Zainab is right. If forget October 7th again, what should the Palestinians do? Maybe Tavleen has an idea that could help them resist in a way that would be acceptable to Israel, so that Israel at some point says, okay, you know what, we will leave these settlements in the West Bank. We will give the whole of the West Bank and Gaza, maybe some minor adjustments on the border so that we don't have too many people who are displaced. But basically, the 1967 border, for the most part, would be respected. If there is a way, and by the way, when you are your own country, there could be an international guarantee for Israel's security. But what is the resistance way? Because whenever you talk about resistance, then you're a terrorist, right? You throw a stone at somebody, you're a terrorist. You say something to somebody, you're a terrorist. But then what is the alternative for them? They're going to basically sit and do nothing, and we forget about them, and then we live on and we do our own kind of debates on something else entirely, and we keep moving on. I think we really need to find a better language for resistance.
Okay, Tavleen, the stereotyping of any protest by the Palestinians as insurgent behavior, as it were.
Okay,
how do you respond to that?
Why are we wandering around the whole place? We are talking about an act of savagery, after which one of the Hamas men rings his father and says, I killed 10 Jews, as if he was on a shooting trip. So, we are talking about the present, a specific incident of extreme savagery. And that is definitely not the way to protest. It's not stone pelting Salman Soz. It is savagery. And we have to accept that. And actually, what are you doing with the hostages? Why are there still 200 hostages locked up underground? Is that legitimate protest?
Salman? I know this can carry on, but
of course, it's not a legitimate protest. Of course, nobody should be kidnapped like the way Hamas kidnapped these people. But the question, Tavleen Singh, for you then is, where have you been up to October 7th?
I'm sorry.
Why don't we? No, it's not just you, understand, but us. All of us. What have we done in some ways to make sure that the Palestinians have a decent life, dignity in their own country? What has the world done? What should the world do?
What have they done? What have they done? They've got masses of money out of Europe, which instead of being spent on hospitals and schools, etc.,
has been Israeli propaganda. I'm sorry. I've been, I know a little bit about the place because I've been there. I know a lot of people from there. This is Israeli propaganda that they got billions upon billions of dollars, and it should have been spent on hospitals and schools, etc. It's not happening.
It's not Israeli
propaganda. It's a very difficult place. It's a very difficult place.
Ask the Europeans.
Okay. What about the West Bank then? What about the West Bank? There's no Hamas in the West Bank.
Can I ask a somewhat different
question?
We're going
Salman? All over the place.
Yeah. Salman, to Zainab's point, I sort of feel what she does. I mean, I've been on a professional assignment to Israel and now back, but I feel like every country is wrestling with its own problems. The Palestinian problem is not top of the mind for the world. I agree with you. My question is, does it need to be? There are also 1 million Muslims in internment camps in China. We don't talk about that. There is great suffering in Yemen. There is great suffering in South Sudan. There is great suffering in Africa. The fact is, nations are going to be guided by their own immediate priorities, right, Salman?
But that's right. There's, of course, every nation has to do its own kind of thinking as to what is acceptable to them, what they don't want to see. But if you look at the Chinese case, it's not as if we may not talk about that, but many people do around the world. Don't think that Xinjiang is basically forgotten, that China does not get condemned. Many people, for people who feel that is important, they talk about it. For us in India, Palestine has historical kind of connections going back to Gandhiji, before that as well. But he in some ways laid down the marker for the country, and we've been following that.
I've been trying to close this debate, but it's so complex, so passionate, so polarized that it never seems to end. Should we do one last round of comments? Yes, Zafar Sareshwala. Yes. Zafar bhai, please unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Unmute yourself. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm so happy that this present government has continued with the support of Palestine, which has been our domain since 1947. And the best part was, because I could see that Mr. Modi's government gave $15 million to Beit University in Ramallah. And I went and saw that, which that $15 million has done. So government of India has been consistent in support, irrespective of their friendship with Israel, but they have totally compartmentalized their support for Palestine, and they continue doing that.
Here's my question to Zainab and to Tavleen. Isn't the Indian position, the Indian current position, the commonsensical position? Hamas committed an act of terror. The civilians of Gaza should not have to pay for it. Zainab? I can't hear Zainab. Zainab, please unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now? I cannot stop praising the Modi government for its position on Israel and Palestine. I think it's the most perfect balancing act that they've done, and that is what they're supposed to do. Like I was explaining in my first point, that geopolitically, India is actually coming into the top-notch international order where, what they say and what they do makes a difference. Like I said, they're sitting in a block where all the important players sit. We have Saudi, UAE, America, and Israel on our side. That's the reason we also are exporting 46% of Israel's defense. And therefore, solidarity with Israel is good in the political, sense. But then again, saying that we are with Palestine, we are with the just cause of Palestine, shows how India stands ideologically. And if the Modi government sides on any side or tips on any side more, I think that's when it'll cause a turmoil, within India, when it comes to the passionate narratives of Palestine in the Muslim population, so to speak. Right now, whatever's happening locally in India, like I said, the Palestine and Israel is just a context for polarization in India, nothing more. Nothing more.
Tavleen, I'll pick up not on the politics because that'll keep us going into a long conversation, on the perfect balancing position by India.
Yes, they've done a good job.
Yeah, I think there's something to agree there, that you can call out terror for what it is, but stand with the rights of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of civilians in Gaza that should not have to pay the price for Hamas. Remember, even if Hamas was voted in, that was many, many years ago. There hasn't been an election since then. There's been an eroding a sort of power of the Palestinian Authority that many Israelis hold Benjamin Netanyahu responsible for. We'll have to leave it there. To Salman Soul, Zafar Sareshwala, Tavleen Singh, Zainab, and earlier to Commodore Singh. Thank you, and to our audience, thank you for watching. See you soon.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.